All right, good morning, everyone. How are you? Yeah, I know who had coffee this morning. I am so excited to see so many people coming to talk about risk management at like 10:30 in the morning. You know, Sheik and I were planning, and we were like, okay, we'll be happy if we get 10 people. So it's great to see that we have a packed audience for that. Just to give us a little bit of our background, I'll go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Thomas Witcher. I'm one of the two sorority and fraternity life coordinators. And
I'm Robinson, and I'm one of the conduct coordinators in student housing. So if students are having some issues, they get to come and have a conversation with me.
And both of our experience around this topic is we have a shared mentor that does a lot of work around risk management in the field. And in both our roles, we both encounter risk management in our daily workings, more on the reactive end as things have happened. And kind of our goal for the presentation today and our goal in our work is to get into a more proactive conversation as a campus and with our students to prevent some of the things that we see happen. Some of our things that we will cover today is defining exactly what risk management is, unpacking kind of a philosophy that we use in our work with students, provide some frameworks for you all to take back into the work that you do on a daily basis, and do some case studies, putting it into practice for you all to kind of have some conversation for us as a group.
We also want to keep in mind that, so we had planned for an hour, and this may be something that you may hear a couple of times today, but we did realize that we have 45 minutes, so some of the content we're going to kind of get through, but we do hope to give you enough time to do the case studies and then have some questions and answers. So this is really just going to be an introduction to. We could really do a whole day-long presentation, workshop type of thing on all of this information, but we just want to give you kind of like the toe in the water introduction to risk management.
So to start us off, what is risk management? And before I open that up to you all, managing risk is not an appropriate answer because there's usually one person in the group that spins that around. While that is appropriate, that's not the definition we're looking for. So for you all, how do you define risk management? Shout it out, raise a hand. This is the audience participation piece that they asked us to do. And if you're going to be shy, I know some of you, and I will call on names, so no pressure. Yes. Figure out what's going to go wrong.
Creating a safe environment to work and play in.
To create a safe environment to work and play in. I love that you got both work and play, because our students do love to work and play very much. Preventing problems.
Can I tag on to the first person?
Sure.
I try to give students more information so when they come over to you guys, there's not as much risk.
Got it. Appreciate that. Somebody back? Yes.
Yeah, we have student trip leaders with outdoor adventures, and so we do a lot of proactive training.
Okay.
We get them aware of things they might encounter, whether that be environmental, terrain, or personalities.
Okay.
To help manage that.
Wow, that's a lot going on over there.
Managing the financial and liability risks.
Ooh, yes, financial liability, something we often don't think about. Anybody else, burning desires? Okay. For the purpose of this presentation, we have defined risk management as the process of identifying potential and perceived risks in anything that a group of students or a student does. It includes taking actions to minimize those risks as monitoring activities and taking corrective actions to minimize injury or loss to an individual and group. Some key things that you all kind of brought up in your own definitions of risk management that I want to highlight in here is that risk management is a process. Risk management does not end when you sit down before your trip leader, before you do an event and be like, okay, check the boxes, we're compliant with policy, we're following this, we talked with CSI, we've got the waivers, we've done everything, okay, we're done with risk management. It continually goes on in taking those actions and documenting those actions that you took proactively, but also monitoring the activity or the trip or whatever it is you're doing as it's going on to troubleshoot that risk as it happens. Risk is going to happen. Something is going to happen to someone or something. It's inevitable. You can only impact somewhat the scale of it's going to happen, but being reactive and being able to show what you were doing in the time that it happens, that's a key piece, depending upon the severity. Obviously, the work that I work in, usually legal counsel gets involved, so that's very much something that's at the front of my mind. But something for you to think of, too, is if you have to go back to a supervisor or somebody else to talk about what happened, it's very good to be able in a position where you say, here's what we did, or here's what the conversations we had with the students proactively to do in the event that X, Y, or Z happened. So kind of defining the philosophy and approach that we use with our students is it's two-part. Obviously, there's the role of the student, which is to focus kind of as I don't know if Colson said it or somebody else, but really caring for each other. And really coming at it, it's not a purpose where, okay, we're compliant with all the policies, we've done everything you've told me to do, I'm done, I don't have to listen to you anymore. It's really re-engaging the conversation of how do you care for the individuals that are part of your organization, or the students that you're bringing to campus, or the students you're taking on that trip. Understanding the intent and the purpose behind a policy. It's not to be a fun killer. It's not to make it so that you can't do the things that you want. It's so that you can do the things that you want in a safe manner, that we are minimizing the chances of anybody getting hurt or loss or injury to anyone. And really fulfilling the values and the purpose of the organization, whether that's the student organization, whether they're tied to a campus department, what is the purpose and why are we doing what we do? And so refocusing that conversation.
And I would also add to those lists of things, like something that came up this morning in our morning speaker was like making sure that students matter. And this process that we're going to go through and the idea of risk management really does that. So if you have a student that's coming to your program or to an outdoor adventure experience, how do we make sure that we are taking care to make sure they're going to have a safe experience, but also as the advisor, which we'll get into in a minute, giving that tough love to the folks that are planning, but giving them the ability and the opportunity to make a mistake, as long as it's not going to cause like some serious harm. But it's okay if your flyer goes out and you accidentally forgot, something on there that might be important, like the date. We can talk about that later. So,
Kind of Sheik open the door. Kind of moving to our role is probably the most of the roles that you all have here on campus, but our roles as advisors. How many of you all had something go terribly wrong with this student group? Raise your hand. Anybody got? Okay. We're not sharing nightmare scenarios. We can get a table during lunch and do some counseling sessions if we need to. But really making sure that we're talking about both the things that have gone well with our students, but also using those lessons that we've learned from the things that have gone wrong. The challenge we have to remember is we've got a 25% give or take turnover in the students that we work with, which we like to see them graduate, but it is also a challenge for us in our work in that we have to continually re-educate. You may feel like you're repeating yourself, but you have to remember students may be hearing it for the first time. Also understanding that students must make some of those decisions for themselves. They've also got to bear some of those consequences of whatever that decision is that they make. And so making sure that you're not buffering that as a role. Kind of going back into two is our role as advisors is to advise. It's not necessarily to cut something off at the pass or to stop it, but to more of kind of give them the parameters in which to operate. I have a very good analogy of it's like, herding cattle, and if any of you have ever herded cattle, that's what it is. You set up the fence and you keep them in that. And so that's really our job as advisors, and let them make those decisions within those parameters that we set up.
Tag. So also just to add on to this too, sometimes I hear like risk management and I think that we're telling them no. Like as soon as a student comes to us and they have this awesome idea, we want to like give out candy and do all this, and then the advisor's like, no, I don't think that's a good idea, because there might be lots of steps that might be involved in it, whatever the program might be. But sometimes if there's going to be some serious harm, there's a way to have conversations with the students about, let's talk about why that might not be a great idea. Okay, so some of the things that we'll talk about is risk assessment. So what are some of the questions or the things, we've heard some of them today, that you might want to take into consideration and have your students think about as they're planning an event or a program or a trip to a conference? One of those things is the physical risk. Is there a potential for someone to get hurt? Outdoor adventures, my guess is that potential is pretty high, right? If you're having a speaker come in, the risk of physical injury might not be as high, but you still do need to think about, like we have a video camera. There are cords that are associated with that. How are we going to make sure that people can get around and not get injured? So the risk of physical could be high or low depending on what the situation is. Reputation. One of the best questions I think that you can ask your organization or the student group that you're working with, or even student workers if they're wanting to put together something and all go out to be a part of a 5K, is how does these actions or this event help us to support our mission of our organization? Does it? Does it not? If something goes really bad, then what does that happen? What does that say? If the word gets out that we haven't done something appropriately, then how does that reflect back on us as a group? The emotional. I think about, if someone's going to perform, let's say, vagina monologues, and there's some pretty touchy monologues that are a part of that. It's not about saying, no, I don't think we should do it, but it's saying, maybe we should invite counselors to come and sit in the crowd, and we're going to identify where they're going to be in case something comes up for someone and a student can go and talk to them, right? So it's thinking about other ways of making things happen so that we're thinking in advance of things that might come up. Financial, someone mentioned this in the back, thank you. So if the goal of my organization is to create an inclusive environment and provide opportunities and access to students, but then I go and have a program and charge $40, probably not really a great idea, right, financially. And, there's other financial. Are we making sure that we're keeping record of all of our goods? How much money we're spending? Where is it going? Who's keeping track of that? And facilities. Have we booked our facility? Do we need to be mindful, like if there's rain, do we have a backup facility? Are there other questions and things we need to talk to the facilities management folks about to have access? Do we need to make sure that we have AV? Is it ADA compliant? All those great things are things that should be kind of thought about in advance just in case. So we're now going to give us an opportunity give you all an opportunity to go through some case studies. And we wanted to get through that part so that you had more time to work on the case study. So what we're going to have you do is we're going to have you work in rows, and the folks on the ground can also participate as well. Because we were unsure, we were thinking like 5 people were going to totally love us, but we have a packed house. We may or may not have enough handouts for everyone, but we'll make sure that that you have the information that you need. Sounds good? So your goal is to read through the case study with your row and answer the question that's on there. And then we'll give you 10 minutes to do that. After that, we'll kind of debrief as a larger group each of the different case studies that everyone has. Questions about the activity? All right.
All right, if I can have you all come back, refocus up front, we'll go ahead and start moving forward. For those of you that were raise your hand if you had case study 1. Raise your hand. All right. So can I get a volunteer to maybe read that out to the group so that they all know what you had? Samantha, thank you for volunteering. I appreciate it. See what happens?
So this is for Scavenger Hunt. A newly reestablished student organization at Great State University is revamping their orientation program for new members and has decided to incorporate a local scavenger hunt to showcase the group's 80 years in the local area. Knowing that the group has reorganized on campus 3 years prior for risk management concerns, you are worried about introducing this activity into the group. The president has invited you to the executive committee meeting tonight to help the chapter leadership understand the potential challenges in preparation using a facilitator approach. Develop 5 talking points before the meeting that you will use with the executive committee.
Thank you. So for those of you that had this, what were some of the talking points that you came up with to engage the students? Don't hold back. Come on.
Here's the group participation part again.
Leo, thanks for
Think about-
volunteering.
yeah.
I saw the hand going up. What did you have?
Yeah. Well, one thing is it going to be too hot? The time of day, is it going to be too hot or too cold when you're doing it? And just thinking about being inclusive of people with different levels of ability,
Okay.
because traveling around.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Sweet. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, one of the things you talked about was understanding the goal of the event.
Okay.
Is it supposed to be competitive where you find a winner? Is it supposed to be a team building event where the whole point is for people to get to know each other and have a good time? Is it more to orient people to a campus where you want to just get them out and discover things? So really understanding what's the point of this as you develop exactly how you want to put it together.
Okay. And why is that important?
So that it can be correctly focused. Knowing who the participants are, the disability issues are a real significant concern.
Yeah. And also how that may impact how the participants view the event. Obviously, if there's a time constraint and a winner and an iPad at the end, maybe a little bit more competitive, then we just want you to complete it, and you got 4 hours, make it happen. So, all right, who else? Anybody else? Nobody else?
We,
You're next.
do I need that?
You just need to talk in so they can record it.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Oh, okay, you're gonna hold it for me,
Yeah,
thanks.
just hold it, I'll focus it up.
We talked about reputation, or managing their reputation in terms of what are the students gonna need to go look for. Also, just where are you gonna connect? So we've had times when students have used our office as a site for a scavenger hunt, and we've had 30 students show up at our front desk and we didn't know they were all coming. So just the importance of also connecting potentially with the places where students will be going. So both of those pieces.
We talked about potential risk in terms of the different items that they have to get. How do they get them physically? Is it going to be something strenuous or just something as simple as walking in a store and grabbing a can of Coke?
Yeah. And are you paying for the can of Coke, or are you just taking the can of Coke and running? So, but obviously on campus and off campus are also another dynamic that I think you're highlighting that's important to understand.
Also, we talked about just initially that it might be good to sort of discuss what the issues were, the problems were with the previous event.
Yeah.
And, making sure that, that you've sort of assessed that and, that you address it and make sure
I
those
like
things
that.
don't happen again.
Yeah, learning from the past. And I like how
Yeah.
you brought that forward. Oh, sweet. Thank you. We go ahead and move on to case study number 2.
Alrighty, so if we can get someone to read that one out loud for me, please. All right, thank you.
A month before school starts, and the student group you advise has picked up on the idea of doing a food eating contest on the quad in the second week as a way to increase the visibility of the group on campus. They've researched campus policy and are still energized about making it a reality. As their advisor, you have some concerns about the event and even received a call from another department expressing concern. Develop a plan of how to engage student group leaders in conversation about how to make the event safer for those involved.
All right, so how'd that go?
Good. Well, as far as, we wanted to know if they had thought about, the physical parts, getting sick, choking, food allergies. Is there a medic on site or an ambulance available if somebody,
Sure, or get sick. Sure, exactly. Are there thoughts from folks in case study 2? Are you all in case study 2 in the back? Because you're hiding like this, like, don't look at me. Don't call on me.
There's the emotional piece
Oh,
too,
sure.
with people with eating disorders and things like that.
Right.
Something that you have to consider.
or food insecurity?
Yeah,
Yeah.
or even like
Cultural
students on campus who don't have enough food to eat, and then, seeing that.
So then that touches upon kind of like the reputation piece. So are we wasting food by doing a food eating contest for some of the students that can't?
About the opposite side of that, if they want to increase visibility and improve their reputation, possibly raising money for, the food bank or
Yeah.
something like that.
Awesome. In the back. Y'all are super silent. Yes, thank you.
We talked about the financial concerns as
Okay.
well as who was going to be paying for the food and if there was any risks in terms of having to sign waivers so that insurance claims that are going to come up.
Awesome. All great conversations. Yes.
From a facility aspect, where is it being held? Is this going to
Indoors, right here. What's the problem?
Is it going to attract a big audience? Therefore, going back to will medics have quick access to the area if something were to happen? And is the facility management okay with possible cleanup?
Yeah. Yes, so definitely having those conversations with the facilities folks. So it's important, all these questions, like we're thinking about this, but can you imagine having these conversations with a student? They're like, oh, we just want to eat food. Like, why does all of this stuff matter? We're just gonna, and then so, yeah, sitting down and say, let's think about it. Let's go back to what is the goal? What are the goals of this activity? And how is it gonna help promote the mission of your group right? And so we do need to think about these things, and it's like, oh, so that learning curve, the student development, all of that is a part of this risk management conversation. Cool?
Moving on to case study number 3. Where's my case study number 3ers? All right, do I get volunteer to read? Sarah, thanks for stepping up. I
All right.
appreciate it.
Case study number 3, out-of-town conference. You're nearing the end of October, and the student group you advise is beginning to plan their annual trip to the Northern California Regional Conference in February. The conference has nearly 500 attendees from across the state, and the group sends 40 students on average. Funding comes from a number of areas, including department funds, fundraising, and students' pockets. The group also serves as ambassadors for your department and is well liked by the department chair and college dean. With the conference being in a remote coastal location over 3 hours away, you have some natural concerns given that there hasn't been funding to send an advisor in the past. How would you begin to engage your student leaders in a conversation about the potential risk that may be present during these initial planning stages?
I heard some giggles like I've had this.
Yeah. Heard it with the last one too. It's good to know we picked some good case
Yes.
studies. So what were some of the ways that you developed kind of to have the talking points with the students, or some of maybe your concerns as an advisor for the group? Joaquin, you guys can see it.
Remote coastal locations, that's a warning sign there. But one of the things we talked about that we anticipated being a challenge was that it's been done, classic student thing. We've done it this way in the past, and there's never been an issue. And so trying to kind of work together with them to figure, well, what have you done? What are some things that have come up? And then how can we work together, maybe to go to the chair or the dean and say, hey, we think if you like this thing, maybe you could shake some money loose to help us kind of make it even better by sending in a professional to help things go smoothly.
Hey, what were some of the other conversations for those of you that had case study 3?
Well, identify, since they have done it this way for however long, what has changed that now there may be a concern? Because, they are going to say, we've always done it this way. But identify, well, these things have changed. And it could even just be, well, funding has changed. So we need to address this, and it may be that, this a staff person is required. I don't know.
Does anybody have
Identify
it
changes.
that may have experienced a similar situation to this? What are some of the natural concerns that you may have as an advisor, somebody responsible for the group? Transportation?
Expectations that might not mesh with one another. Students' expectations of their experience versus university's expectation of the student experience.
Got it. Differences in expectations. What else?
With hundreds of students involved, there might be some alcohol present.
No! What? Maybe some pot too, who knows?
Near the water.
That IQ level drops real quick when you start getting them together. What are some of the other concerns, or some of the other ways to engage students, and maybe some of those conversations about what may be present after the conference isn't in session?
Maybe establishing a code of conduct or level of expectations that they have to sign when you have an emergency contact list. So that way there's ramifications. They go to the conference knowing what the expectation is, and they sign an agreement form saying that they do abide by those.
And you brought up a key piece too, is having an emergency contact form in the event that something happens. Aside from the advisor from the institution, Johnny or Sally ends up having to go to the hospital, whether it's a broken leg or they drink too much. Who are you going to call? Like, what parent or guardian do you need to notify to make sure that everything's being met?
I mentioned lodging, that situation, if it is like 3 or 4 hours away, the fact that they're gonna drive 3 or 4 hours there in one day, all students, attend a full day conference, and then expect to drive them all back. So then what does lodging look like? And that's where the advisor then, I think, becomes an important part of monitoring your evening activity.
Or even driving back, because we know our students get 8 hours every night, right?
I have 2 things. So first, I think having a conversation around sexual assault and sexual harassment, which could happen in a very large space with a lot of people. And also, I think when it comes to accessibility, right? So there's a bus that's going to take you. Is it, can someone in a wheelchair go? Also, the accommodations, you have gender neutral housing, right? Because are trans people feeling, not included in this conference? So having those things.
Last one before we move to the next.
Those are the issues of funding, and I think it's important with students particularly to talk about what
All right.
And I just want to add to that, some of the things, or something that you can do, something tangible, is setting up like a pre-trip meeting with those that are going. So everyone's in the same room. You go over the expectations, so they're all there. They all hear it at the same time. No one heard anything different. And you give them an opportunity to ask questions if they have questions about it. But just similar to like if you were about to go on a trip or something, I think with your group, you know what your expectations are. Like even planning a trip with your family, right? Hey, this is what we need to get. This is who's driving. I've already purchased the tickets. This is where we're staying. So it's kind of the similar thing, but also thinking about the student. When it comes to the traveling piece, that's so huge, and I think sometimes that gets missed. Who's driving? Are the students driving? Are we able to, reserve university vehicles? Do students have insurance? Will they be able to communicate if someone gets lost? So all those little things and getting those things ready ahead of time, maybe no one gets lost. But if someone does, look at what we just have. We got this plan. We got our walkie-talkies. Okay, we have our cell phones. But depending on where you're at, does the cell phone have service? What's your backup plan? So it's just like, if you need it, it's there. But if you don't, that's great. We can use it the next time. Number 4, if someone could read that out loud for me, that would be fantastic. Number 4, I know you're on this side of the room. Yes, awesome, please, thank you.
Case study number 4 is titled, Campus Speaker. One of the 2 student groups who advised on the side is planning to bring a speaker to campus, and they secured a large auditorium commitment. Given that advising this group is not a simple function of your job description, we haven't been able to attend many meetings, but meet periodically with the president. It is 2 weeks before the event, and he just connected the dots to understand that the speaker's topic is about Israel and the Palestine conflict. Your heaviness does drop, given what has been in the news in the past month. Develop a list of next steps you would take as the group's advisor, as well as how you would quickly engage the student leaders in a conversation about the risk management issues that may arise. What campus resources might we tap into to help these efforts?
A lot of silence came across the room when that one got read out. So group 4 folks, what came up for you? Yes.
I think engaging the leaders in an early discussion about what you can do around making sure that, number 1, everyone feels safe and secure in the environment. So looking at the location, is the location big enough, does it have the capacity, and then having either individualized spaces or separate spaces where students can go, counselors can deal with the emotional issue that's going to come up with bringing up a topic like this. And then from a physical safety security standpoint, looking at, are the students comfortable with bringing in IG codes? Do they want to monitor it themselves? What's the protocol for that? And then bringing in senior leadership as well to understand the issue and to provide support at the event.
Awesome. That's great. Others in group 4, sure.
Careful selection of a moderator.
Who might that be? Sure. Others in group 4. Those are pretty thorough. She covered it. She's got it done. Experience in this area. Okay.
Can you talk about the importance of the promotion of the event, like how you promote it?
How will it be promoted? What types of advertisements will you have? What will that look like? What will they say? Sure. I get one back here, and then we'll come back up to the front.
I was actually pretty but I'm thinking, possibly looking at the faculty to see, identify faculty members who are doing research in this area to be present and to keep the speaker and the session on a scholarly level.
Sure.
That keep it as a learning exercise as opposed to letting it become a runaway emotional event. And so I think involving faculty in something like this to be one of the moderators or be present or introduce the speaker or something, that's a way that academic affairs and student affairs can work together this kind of.
And even like having that pre-meeting though, right, with the faculty member, so then it doesn't become a faculty program, but making sure the students have some involvement in that and saying, hey, this is what we're hoping that you might be able to help us out with, like let's work together. I think that's awesome. Yes.
Would you want to anticipate media coverage and then designate one person to be, like the media contact or like a PR person,
Mhm.
depending on the size of the event, you know, if you have media showing up.
And even making contact with the university, or media contact with the university. Sure, your head's
I
up.
just was thinking about this, 2 weeks is a very short time period. And one of the nice things about this example is this is a great opportunity to be talking with the leaders about, you know, the next time you want to plan an event, what are some things you can do earlier, or what can we learn from this really intense 2 weeks that are coming up to help the next time you as a group or you as individuals want to put something together like this.
Yeah. Yes.
I think it's important that the group sets out expectations for the group within itself, but also for the speaker and for the audience members. They set up right at the beginning, say, this is our goal and what we hope to be our outcome of this event, and this is how we hope it goes through. The speaker will talk, and one person raises their hand. There's no aggressive confrontation.
Sure. Even setting up mics, so like if someone wants to have a conversation, they need to come up and come to the mic versus just shouting out. So putting up some of those things. That would be like, then goes back to the facilities. Does it like lend itself to that? And is it safe? And can everyone get to the mic? Yes, last one, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, it also might be worthwhile to have meetings in advance with the various student groups that have interest in this area to have that conversation before the event.
If you have the time to do that. But for this particular case study, you're just finding out. So do the best that you can with the information that you have. Yeah, but also making sure that you're setting up a space that's safe for all those that come to participate. And I really appreciate that. Like, let's just be transparent. We know this is going to be like a touchy topic for some folks. Just saying that and owning it and owning the space. But this is what we're hoping to get out of it, so that hopefully like the folks that you can't meet with understand what the goal is, and saying we're going to give everyone the opportunity to speak. We have folks for here, you know, I'm the mediator, the moderator, and to help out. So yeah, all those great things are important. So one of the questions that we wanted to talk to you all about is, so you've had the opportunity now to talk to each other about these case studies. Raise your hand if you've ever engaged in conversation like this with students. All right. Raise your hand if you've ever engaged in conversations like this with other staff members. Awesome. That's pretty great. That's pretty great. It's not easy though, yeah? It's pretty difficult to do at some point. And sometimes there's some drawbacks depending on the situations. Not everyone has the same goal or mission that you might have. Students might really just want to have fun, which is great. We can do that. But again, talking about what did you say? Wrangling the cows? No. herding, wrangling. Totally different. The cows and making sure all is well. Last thoughts.
I would just say we've got 2-3 minutes for Q&A, and so if anybody has any, and you know, I think the big thing we want you all to leave today is know that you're not the only person on the island having these conversations, and at least walking away knowing that there are other people having similar conversations, and hopefully through the case studies you realize through those conversations is how we can make sure that we're dotting all the I's and crossing all the T's as much as we can to be proactive in our work. So here are some of the resources that we have utilized. Both on campus, we do have a lot of risk management resources and professionals that work in this arena. So please feel free to reach out to them, particularly our folks in the Center for Student Involvement. They do a lot of risk management and proactive work. So even if it is 2 weeks or a week out or 2 months out, feel free to utilize them. But then also some references from off campus. Texas A&M, and then Kim Novak is the individual that both Sheik and I work with very closely and have worked with a lot, kind of our understanding of risk management and how to pull in some of those best practices in our work.
And the Texas A&M has a really great resource, and it's part of their student activities website. They're kind of like the pioneers and stuff based off an incident that took place on their campus. And so they even have like forums and online things that you can, like, again, proactively help students to think about. When is your event going to take place? Have you thought about a location? Who's driving? All those things, like some of those questions are already pre-planned into a form. So, you know, use some of their information if you need to, or to go to think about some questions that you might ask your students to think about. The other piece of that is the evaluation piece. So it's always a process. you're before the event happened, you're monitoring, making sure, seeing what's going on, and then afterwards having a sit down with the organizers of the event and saying, how did it go? Did anything come up that we weren't expecting? How did our pre-planning go? Did we have to use any of those things? Would we do it again? If not, why not? So that you can adjust and plan if you do plan to do it again. Now you're like continuing to learn from the events that you're doing and the events that you're putting on for them. So for them, they get to learn this really great and awesome model that they probably are like, that's too many questions. But then they can use that whenever they plan events any other time in their careers, whether that be here on campus or doing something off campus. They'll be able to use the pre-stuff, the during the event, and the post stuff. All right? Now for questions.
Thinking back to that fourth scenario, are there any conditions, or under what conditions, something like that, would you feel comfortable saying, this is not enough time, we're going to shut this event down?
Well, and I think the key piece in there, if you read the case study, like that it was an added responsibility that person took on. It wasn't a central. I think it's different if you, as a staff member, are directly supervising and in charge of that program versus something that's pro bono. So I think thinking of it like what authority do you have as the advisor to say, like, yeah, I think we need to pull the plug on this, or look at it. I think part of that, also kind of helping the students navigate that decision by talking with other departments on campus and kind of saying, like, let's bring in some of the areas that this is going to affect and other people that we need to pull in for this. I mean, that's obviously one of the extremes of, yeah, it's going to be a highly emotional issue, and you're probably going to have some other individuals and groups that may not even be a part of our university community show up that may disrupt that. And so, through that conversation process, the students may arrive to the point of like, okay, we didn't really want it to be that blow up into something potentially that big, and they may come to that their own. But yeah.
And it's also, I think, about reframing too. Like, so some people, they spend a lot of time maybe contacting the speaker to come, and they've done their posters and they're very excited. So it might be a little bit heart crushing to say, oh, we can't do it. But maybe it's like, let's postpone it till later so that we can think about some of these other situations that might come up so that it can be awesome. Not that it's not awesome now. We want to make it awesomer. Yeah. Totally language there.
Leo.
Yeah, I was wondering if you could share an example of something you heard from students that at first made your head throb, but then you feel like you're able to make an advising impact and kind of turn it in a good direction.
Well, I work with sororities and fraternities, and nothing goes wrong. No war stories. Jeez.
No drinking.
Yeah, I mean, I will say probably just using that anytime that like the word liquor comes up, and I'm just like, oh, geez. Like, I mean, just because there's so many things that get tied back to that. But yeah, that's probably the one, like, as soon as it comes up, I'm just like, okay, let's have the conversation again and get the students to understand how do you manage an event around that. The conference one's another great one. We send students to a regional conference every spring, and we've gradually increased it. And we're kind of getting to the point where we're sending about 10 students, and I'm kind of like, I think we need to be sending an advisor. Before, when it was just, like our council presidents and they were individual leaders that we had a strong relationship and we knew, when we start expanding that, I kind of get a little cringy of like, okay, if also knowing the conference, they will also send a letter to like the dean of students, vice chancellor, and say, if your students get out of line, like, here's what happened, you were not invited back for 2 years, and they will make it an issue. And like, I don't really want to deal with that back here, and so evaluating kind of some of that stuff. So I don't know if you have anything you want to
add to it. I mean, so working in student housing, the RA's put on a multitude of programs, and sometimes there's something that it's not necessarily like makes my head throb, but it's like, okay, let's take a step back and list out what are some of the issues that might come up so that we can, again, make it awesomer. And so it's more really just about having that patience to have those conversations, because sometimes it does feel like you have to have them over and over and over again, but then again, it might be a different student development. Really, we need to be patient and be ready. And then also, like, knowing that we don't need to worry if some of those little mistakes are made, because that's when the learning happens, right? So when the conflict is where the growth kind of can occur. So I don't know that I've had any head-throbby ones, but there's some that come up that go, ooh, yeah, we need to talk about that. But not in a way that says, no, you can't do it, but like, let's just talk about like the goal of your program.
With that, we are over. as I'm seeing the note in the back. So I want to thank you all for coming, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your time here today.